Welcome to Transformed by Grief. My name is Ellie Thomas, and I am here to guide you on your transformational grief journey. From feeling lost, raw, and brokenhearted, questioning everything in you and around you, to reconnecting to the truth of who you are and the beauty, fulfillment, and vibrancy of life that is still available in you and through you. On this podcast, we explore the depths of what it means to say yes to life again after you've been broken open by pain and grief. We will explore what it means to create a deep, loving, and reverent relationship to yourself, to grief, and to life in a way that allows you to begin to rebuild from the inside out and to create a powerful foundation for a joy-filled, alive feeling and fulfilling life you love. Welcome back to Transformed by Grief. I'm happy to bring you an interview / more like a conversation, I guess, but an interview conversation with one of my best friends, Melina Charis. And Melina and I are coming together. We're bringing our beautiful, powerful work and containers together to bring a new community grief event to life. And this event is called Sacred Ground, and it's happening on November 17th. And you can sign up now. I'll leave the link in the show notes for everything. And so we wanted to have a conversation about bringing kind of our journeys together. And I interview her about what Transformed by Grief means to her right now. She shares some of her story, and then we really get into talking about the power and the importance of different aspects of finding presence and coming into the body and exploring and connecting with grief beyond words, beyond mental and intellectual exploration. And we talk about the event a little bit more at the end, but I want to give you some details here. Sacred Ground is a ceremony for grief and growth, and the beginning portion of it will be a guided tea ceremony. It's all virtual, so you'll be doing this from your home. Melina will be guiding us on Zoom for the tea ceremony. And then I'll lead us in a longer invitation of connecting to what's present emotionally and with our grief, and into a embodied intuitive movement practice that will help you process and feel and begin to tap into greater nuggets of wisdom or greater release, really whatever is there for you. And then we'll close with space where you can ask questions, or we'll have a circle to really witness each other and offer you space to share what your experience was and receive anything that you would like to receive. And I just wrote a really powerful newsletter a couple days ago about how incredibly powerful and life-changing the openings are when we come together to let our grief be shared in community, and when we allow ourselves to be seen and witnessed in our grief fully. This opens the doors to the tremendous medicine of being actually truly seen and known for potentially the first time in our lives. I know the first time I was witnessed in my grief by people that got it, by people that knew how to hold space for it. It totally transformed my life and my work, really, and gave me access to this feeling that all of me can be present here. And I am loved and seen and respected and held in my highest, and my wounds can be here too. There is no pity that's alive here. It's just a total process of revering and honoring everything that we've walked through to get here, and being held up in the truth and potential of your heart and the greater parts of you beyond just your pain or just the world's understanding of who you are. So we would love to have you join us for Sacred Ground on November 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. All you need to have with you is some tea or herbs. It's all on the registration part. A safe space to move, to be still. We're going to play some music, so you might want headphones. You're going to want comfy clothes. This is going to be like a 1.5 hour retreat that you get to kind of check into and move into a space of softness, move into a space of slowing down, move into a space of silence, and really honor and allow whatever is there to come up. So we can't wait, and we hope to see you there. Let me just read Melina's bio so you have some background on her before I share our conversation. Melina Charis is a mother, ceremonialist, and guide for those walking in the intense initiations and transitions of life. She is a giver, a void walker, a space holder, a bridge. She is fiercely devoted to the wisdom of her body and the initiatory path of grief, death, and sacred creation. She has 10 plus years of experience with transformative embodiment practices, and she's here to hold you deeply and fully through your own initiations, to guide you through your dark nights of the soul as you remember and find the light within. You can visit her website at www.melinacharis.com and connect with her on Instagram at Melina Charis. Here is our beautiful conversation on grief and being transformed by grief, and join us for Sacred Ground. Welcome, Melina, to Transformed by Grief.
Thank you.
Nobody knows this probably, but you gifted me the name of this podcast, so it feels very appropriate to welcome you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's such a gift.
Such a gift to be here. Yeah, I was so excited when you said the name. It feels so you. And as I said to you, I gifted you the name, but I really thought you had already come up with it.
My energy had, and you read it back to me.
Yes, exactly. So beautiful to be a part of the new evolution of your beautiful work and magic and sharing your voice.
Thank you. So Melina and I have been friends for 4.5 years. We've been very good friends for about progressively for the last 4 years. And in these past 4 years, both of our moms have died, and we've sat with them in their last breaths. And as the people that listen here know, mom died almost 4 years ago, a little less. 3, almost. It'll be 4 in February, which is wild.
Yeah.
And your mom died this past June.
Yep.
And you also had a baby in the past year.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, your mom was diagnosed with cancer, and that's when, well, you had really accompanied me in all parts of my grief journey, truly, and we deepened our friendship in that. I think our friendship went to a whole nother level when you experienced your mom's illness for the first time.
Yeah.
And we've been able to just turn toward each other over and over and over again with more and more depth for the past many years. And now we walk with the tremendous gift of sharing our grief together and welcoming others into spaces where the raw aliveness of their grief lives, and allowing that to, like, I'm almost seeing like literally the rawness of a beating heart, like connect that place where grief pulses right along with our heart, and allowing ourselves and others to to tend that and to experience that and to be transformed by it. So I think I'd like to start with just when you sit with the energy of transformed by grief for you, what that looks like and feels like right now.
Yeah, I think it's so devastating to me that in our culture, we've largely lost the art of being with our grief and giving our grief space and trusting our grief and feeling our grief. I mean, anyone who's lost a loved one knows how a very unfortunate part of that process is that a lot of people don't know what to say. A lot of people drop off. A lot of people say weird things. People just don't know. They were not taught or shown, most people, how to be with their own grief, how to be with someone who is grieving. And that is another layer of grief when you are in that, whatever your grief is, but specifically with the illness, of a loved one, the death of a loved one. There's another layer that the griever has to be with, of other people, not in our society as a whole, expecting grief to be linear, as time goes on, expecting you to just like really actually glorifying quickly going back to work, quickly, quote unquote, moving on.
Moving
Yeah.
forward.
Like moving on, as if we could ever do that. So to really tend to our grief in an ongoing way for the rest of our lives, and to be willing to tend to all of our grief, is an art. It is a lost art, and it is one that, for the aliveness, to really feel the full spectrum of life, to really feel our full joy, our full aliveness, we have to be able to meet the depths of our grief regularly. You and I have talked about this, but it's often these cataclysmic events that I just wrote a piece on, how as you mentioned, my mom was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago, and it ripped me open in so many ways. And a lot of people, it was like stage 2, stage 1, and nobody could really understand in my life why it ripped me open, so except you. Like, you understood, and that's why you were a safe place for me, because everyone else, literally almost everyone else in my life, was like, she's gonna be fine, it's cool, it's all good, like, why is this affecting you so much? And in that moment, my life completely changed, obviously with her death as well, but that was really the moment of receiving that text from her that they found cancer, which in my body and heart I already knew the truth of. And I think somewhere I also knew the truth of, her life was going to be coming to an end. I knew it. So, and even in this moment right now, like, I am so grateful to be connected with my tears in this way. You have really walked this before and shown me, along with other people, but really you're such a beautiful beacon to me of like, just, and everyone who I really admire is able to just feel their tears in this way. And to, like, when the tears come, we don't apologize. we let them and this was not always how I was. I would push them away. I would apologize. I was not this open. I was not this connected to my sadness, to my grief, to my aliveness ultimately. And I'm like, anytime I feel the tears this way and I allow them to be here, I'm so grateful. To be moved by life. And be like really fully in touch with what I'm saying. I'm talking about the death of my mother. I'm talking about this intense journey that I walked. And as I, just wrote this piece, for a long time, I thought, oh, 2 years ago when my mom was diagnosed, that was my first experience of grief. And no, I realized no. We all walk with grief through all of our lives. Grief of leaving childhood, grief of the parents we didn't get, grief of dreams not followed or relationships that needed to end, but just so much. There's grief. We all walk with it. And just because we pretend it's not there doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so that moment was not my first experience of grief, but it was the first moment I could no longer look away from my grief. It was in my face. And it's like, yeah, she was diagnosed, she had surgery, and it was like, okay, she's okay. And so much of me just wanted to go back, like, just take me back before I, this was in my face, the fragility of life, because it's so hard. It's so painful. It's so much. It's like, oh, and then in the early days of raw grief after just receiving a diagnosis or just a death or a breakup or, whatever it is, that those early days of raw grief are just so fucking hard. So hard. And of course it's like, I don't want to go back to that place. And then when she was re-diagnosed last year, I was like, here it is again. I'm a little bit familiar with it, but here it is. And then when she died, like 6 months later, again, here it is. So to me, being transformed by grief is just allowing yourself to be transformed by grief, to be changed, to acknowledge your grief, to tend it, to be with it, to feel it like as it moves, to not apologize, to not stop the tears, to not, and grief isn't just about sadness, as we both know. It's so much more than that. It's so deep and rich, and it's so much. It's so much. It's like the more I learn about and embody and experience grief, the more I'm like, I don't really know what it's so big. I can't put it into words. And I think so many people are like, grief equals sadness, grief. And I thought that too. I mean, right after my mom died, I was like, why am I not laying in the bed crying? I mean, I also had a 3-month-old baby. So that was also a big part of this process. Learning to be a mother at the same time as losing my mother. But grief wasn't at all what I thought it was going to look like. And I remember in those intense months of anticipatory grief, in the 6 months before she died, before that, but it really intense in the 6 months before she died, when we knew her cancer was terminal and she had about 6 months to live. It was like, it could be any moment. And, I'm pregnant, I'm giving birth. Is she going to be here to meet my son? I mean, so many layers of it. But I remember just being like, what is it going to be like? What is it going to, I don't know. What is it going to be? And you were like, I don't know. You were like, I have no idea. And it's like, I was like, I just want somebody to tell me what it's going to be like, and that's also what's so hard about grief, is that it is such a individual experience, and it can feel so, so lonely, and it is lonely. And I think that's a part of it. And it's so universal at the same time. I mean, it's like, we're all going, like I said, we're all living with grief of many things, of the planet, of the environment, of, colonization, like so much grief, patriarchy, like it's endless. And it just does us all, it makes us sick. It does us all such a disservice to stuff it and to not have these rituals and ceremonies and spaces where we can deeply feel it. Because for me, I'm somebody who luckily loves asking for help. I know a lot of people have major issues with that, and I am not one of those people. So I knew I needed support groups and spaces after my mom died, and I joined a few and quickly realized, oh, I need something deeper than this. Like, I am a ceremonialist. I do tea ceremony. I am like, I work with my body. I like to move and dance and cry and write and channel. And, I just needed deeper spaces. Like, I love these spaces to talk about our grief are so beautiful and important. And I was like, I need something deeper than this. Like, I need a space to just feel. And I think that's something that's so beautiful about tea ceremony, which is one of my practices that I have been practicing for almost 4 years, and serving others now for a year and a half maybe. And one thing people say when they come to tea ceremony with me is, wow, I just heard this from somebody the other day who came, like, who is in a deep grief process. And she was like, I've been talking about my grief nonstop. I've been talking. I just needed a space to feel and cry. And I'm so glad for this space. And I have needed spaces like that as well. I have a like regular therapist, and that's beautiful. And I talk to you, and you are so great at also talking and holding deep space. And we weave in and out of that, which is so incredible. Like, in some of our conversations, as you supported me so beautifully through my grief journey, I mean, we weaved between talking to sobbing to praying to meditating to breathing to silence to more talking, beautifully, just weaving all of these. Because, you know, that's the other thing, is like, talking is so beautiful and important. And we need crying, we need yelling, we need laughing, we need music, we need dancing, we need, all of these things too. And grief is going to tell you what it needs if you're open to listen. So I really needed in my grief just a lot of different spaces. And I needed also just spaces to just drop into my body and just feel. And sometimes it was crying, and sometimes it was joy and peace, strangely. And sometimes it was stillness, and sometimes it was just that beautiful sense of like, I am being held. When I was holding so much, tending to a newborn, losing my mom, dealing with my marriage, dealing with the family dynamics and everyone else's grief and everything that shifts when someone you love dies. And I just needed to be held by somebody who had the capacity to hold that and wasn't going to turn away and wasn't afraid and wasn't going to think I was too much or wasn't going to try to give me platitudes that so many people, which I just heard from a family member who, again, I know means well, but I heard so much, and I still hear, well, at least your mom got to meet him. At least your mom got to meet your son.
Wow.
And I'm like, I just said this. I had a family gathering, and one of my family members said that to me, and I said, yes, and it is still very devastating. It was beautiful, and she's not here to see the rest of his life. She's not here. She was here for 11 weeks of his life. She deserved more than that. I deserved more than that. He deserved more than that. So both of those things can be true.
Yeah. Yeah. When you allow the tears, and this is a you to Melina you and a you to the global you, well, you just so beautifully shared that with us. I was just sitting with you as you let the tears come right now. And there is this moment where when we allow ourselves to go beyond the words of grief and we feel it in our bodies, whether it's coming up as tears, as groans, as yells, as physical movement, or some kind of creative thing, however it wants to come, it's like the greatest, what the words that are coming is equalizer of life. Like everything that feels distant all of a sudden feels close, and everything that feels topsy-turvy all of a sudden comes even. It's like this opening into living into the current of life in that moment so deeply and so connected. And in that, there's movement that happens in our being. There's healing that happens in our being. There's cultivation. There's growth. There's all of these things, not trying to approach grief to get to those things, but allowing grief to be our doorway into these things. And so sitting with you now as you were letting the tears come out, I just wanted to say to the people listening, like, can you feel that? Can you feel just this? It's so interesting. It's just like grief. It's hard to put words to. It's like this stillness that is not flat.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not empty. It's very full.
Yeah. It's so luscious. It's so almost voluptuous in its form, like overflowing out. And it's deeply painful. And also so much more is there.
Yeah.
And so I love that you just shared us with that, or shared that with us in that way. And I love this idea of, you and I met in a spiritual based group. We're not entry level spiritual people. We've been engaging in the depths and explorations of spiritual life for many years. We've shared that. And so for you arriving to grief, maybe you hadn't engaged with grief in the way that you began to when your mom was diagnosed, but you were beyond the entry level of that exploration. And so I also love to speak to that, because that in and of itself can be extra lonely a little bit.
Yeah.
Our society operating in and I don't mean to say that these things are entry level, because I think there so much has grown from them, but when there is a culture of a lot of interconnection, spiritual connection, and inner evolutionary work that's already been there, and then grief arises or meets our world, it can feel like, what do we turn to and where do we turn to now?
Yeah.
And you and I have had each other to know what the power of letting all of that alive together feels like. Like, I don't need to let go. I might question everything that I've ever explored before. I might change. I might not want to engage in these same things. And yet I can let all of these questions, all of these doubts, all of these recalibrations, these spinning of my lens, this turn of my lens be here at the same time as all of these other things. And in order for all of that to be present, I think that usually there's a process on the other side for somebody holding space. They've needed to go through their own journey with that. Maybe it wasn't through death and grief. Maybe it was through something else. But yeah, there's this well of there's this well underneath the grief work that we know in the world it's ripe and ready to hold people at whatever level they're coming in at, and I don't mean level in a hierarchical way. It's like however you're connecting,
wherever you are
it's
in your
ready
process, in your journey.
Yeah, it's ready to hold people as you float and let the water carry you.
Yeah.
And I love how beautifully your story speaks to that.
Thank you. Yeah, notice how in the moving with the tears, a couple things. And you mentioned it too, like there's the speaking about the grief, which is so important to process, to write all of these things. And then there's the bodily experience of grief. And I think we're in our culture, we're getting more into, oh yeah, the body is important. Like we're so, in the mind about a lot of things, and grief too. And that's a beautiful starting place. Talk therapy and talking with friends and all of that is so important. And I think what people are starting to wake up to more and desire is spaces to drop into the deeper layers that live in the body. And there's absolutely no rush for that. I mean, I think with my own grief, it's not like, for me, I think, which you will remember from my grief process right after losing my mom, I was like, I couldn't cry a lot, which was very strange for me. I mean, most of my life, I intellectualized my pain. I was told by so many after it was like the third or fourth therapist or coach or healer I was working with, who was like, you're talking about your sadness, but you're not feeling it, which would annoy me so much. I was like, no, I am, because I understand it. Like, I love understanding and analyzing. So that's like my safe zone. And I'm really like, I'm so, as I mentioned earlier, like, I'm so grateful that I am now so much more in touch with actually feeling things. And that's not to say I'm perfect at it whatsoever. However, I know the importance of to stay open to all of life, to my vibrancy, to creations, to all of it in an organic way. That's not, let me just do my gratitude, in an organic way. It just requires this relationship with pain and sorrow and grief that is open, and it's not a forced rush thing. Because for me, the other side of this can be like, when she first died, I was in shock. Even though I knew, because that's the other thing people love to say to me. And I just had someone say this, well, but it's easier because you knew, you knew you had 6 months. That's another thing I hear.
I could talk about that for a long time.
So that's another thing that people think, and it's fine. And in some ways, sure, like, yes, it was beautiful that we had this time, that I had time to start processing, and it is different than losing someone suddenly, and they're still dead, and it's this. So anyway, I mean, I could go on about that, but I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
You were saying that someone just said to you that it would be easier, and I'm just caught on the word easier.
Yeah.
I just want to invite anybody, if anyone ever said anything is easier to you about your grief, easier doesn't really exist in the vocabulary of loss and grief, or even pain.
Yeah.
I just want to invite that in first.
I remember
you were speaking to that. It was hard to connect with your body.
It was, because I'm so now in my, being in my spiritual journey and my, all of this stuff, just really, for me, it's been a journey of returning to my sadness and allowing that, and allowing my anger, and allowing these quote unquote negative emotions. I hate that we call them that, because they're just emotions, and we're all, and it's not to like we're not trying to heal our way out of them. We're actually trying to meet them more deeply, so that we're not like, oh my God, this is completely overtaking me, or breaking me or whatever. And of course, those moments are beautiful too. And a lot of us have those. I've had those. But it's like, can we build relationships? Tending the garden is coming back. Like, can we build relationships? Can we tend to these emotions? Can we allow them to move? You said something beautiful about like moving with it. And as you all felt and heard when I was moved, there's a natural pause. It's just like a pause, and an allowing myself to really feel that wave, rather than explaining it or saying, I'm so sorry, or rushing through it. And that's hard in spaces where that's not always the norm, or that's not always welcomed. I've been in spaces like that, where it's really brave. And I also wanted to say that if you're not there, that's okay. Like, there's no like, oh, I'm crying, so this, like, great, it's that's not, because I was in shock for a while. And again, even though I knew, I'm putting this in air quotes, even though I knew she was going to die, I was still in shock, because nothing can prepare you. Like, again, the mind cannot prepare you for the embodied experience of a loved one's death. Just nothing. So, which you knew. And when I was trying to be like, tell me what it's going to, you're like, you're just going to have to go through it. And I was like, okay. Because nothing can prepare you. So I remember feeling like, why am I not crying more? I'm in touch with my feelings. What's happening? Is something wrong? And then just kind of realizing grief cannot be rushed. And the other side of this is like wanting to just rush to get somewhere in my grief, wanting to rush. And for me, that when my mom died, I was 11, 12 weeks postpartum, which is a strange time, because most people are kind of coming out of the bubble and wanting to start to see family and friends, which I did. And I had really put my life on hold for a long time to tend to my mom. In her last months, I shut down my business, which was doing really well. I shut it down completely and really publicly, and tended to her, and then tended to my son after he was born. And so when she died, I was really feeling a strange desire to return outwardly, to see friends, and I attended a concert, and in my mind I was like, why? Like, this is weird. I don't know. I should be like crying in the bed, and what I thought grief should look like. But, I just really trusted that, because that's where I wanted to go. And I did. And then after about a month and a half of that, my nervous system was fried, and my nervous system was like, okay, we did that. And you're tending a new baby, you're, and like, I started to like, just realize, okay, I'm entering, the shock was wearing off. That was, I think, giving me some energy to do these things. And I just heard really clearly, and my body was speaking to me. My body, I mean, I was exhausted. I mean, I wasn't sleeping because of my baby as well. So there was that, but my body was just exhausted. And it was like, okay, time to rest. And I listened. And it's funny because so many people were like, wow, it's incredible that I just shut everything down. I had started going back to my business a little bit. And I shut it down again, which was really hard because I was like, I just came back and, and now I'm shutting it down again. But I mean, when my body speaks, I listen. And I've learned, I've learned over the years to do that, even when it's really uncomfortable. And so I really slowed down again. And I honored that for like 6 weeks after her death, I needed to just be back out in the world. And that was beautiful. And that it wasn't at all what I thought that grief would look like. And then I realized, okay, I'm past some of the shock and I am out of the death portal, which, as you know, is an intensely psychedelic experience. And just so intense. And so I was like coming off of that and coming off of the birth portal that I had been in just weeks prior to that. So I've been in a lot of portals, and my body was just craving rest and to slow down. And I was scared because I knew that meant that the grief would come up. And it did. And I slowed everything down, and I just remember driving around and crying. And then at the same time, I was like, oh, I was like, my tears are back. Like, I felt, as I really listened and slowed down, of course I was afraid. And I knew is what I needed to do. And when I was ready, though, I wasn't ready to do that right after she died. I wasn't. And, but when my tears kind of came back, I was grateful because I was like, okay, I have more capacity now that I've taken a lot of things off my plate so that I actually have space and time as much as I could as a new mother to just be with some of this. And, yeah, it's especially as a new mother. I mean, I remember like it wasn't that I didn't cry at all, but I was ready. I could feel my body was ready for rest and more space so that I could meet the grief on a deeper layer. And I mean, I know I will forever for the rest of my life, luckily, I know that grief is not linear. Like, I think we really think in this culture, like the more time that passes, the more it's quote unquote easier. There it is. I have no illusions of that. I think the grief shifts, of course, as we shift. And I think, yeah, there's always new layers. There's just more that we can access and different, and that comes up. And just, I think the main thing is to just, as much as we can, stay open to it. And I think you mentioned another thing about people that have met this. And it's not that the containers that I wanted to be a part of that could really hold me, it's not that anyone was quote unquote over their grief or a master at it. Everyone is in relationship to it. And the people that I really trusted and needed to hold me in my grief, it didn't matter if they had the same circumstances as me or not, or lost the same person or not, or experience whatever. Like, it wasn't that at all. It was a felt energetic sense of this person honors their grief. this person has met their grief. This person makes space for and goes deep with their grief, doesn't push it away, and that's felt, someone does not need to really say anything to me. I can feel it in their energy. And those are the spaces that I really needed. It's just like the spaces I really needed too were like that you are so beautiful at. And then the other people I chose to hold me is like, there's no judgment at all. Even when I needed to avoid my grief, even when I needed to numb it, that's fine. Like it's okay. That's part of it. It's not, sometimes we can't, sometimes it's like a titration, and it's different for every person. But for me, I had just been through such intensity for 6 months. I had been through the ups and downs, the anxiety of when is she going to die, her watching her suffer, bringing my son in. So much. Like, I'm going to be processing this year for the rest of my life because it's been so much. That I could not. I just, right after she died was not the time. And everyone I was with just trusted my process so deeply. And I did have a beautiful mentor, Jasmine, reflect to me lovingly, when I was hitting that kind of breaking point and I just had a kind of complete breakdown like 6 weeks after she died, where a few things were just converging and my body was losing it. My nervous system was just so fried. I did have her in one of our sessions lovingly reflect to me, why are you, it's like, I think she said, can you share with me why you're wanting to go back to work? I was so triggered. I was like, because I love my work and my clients need me back, and which I do, and it's true. And I was resisting the void. I was like so angry. I was so annoyed. I was like, I've been in the void for so fucking long. I just want to be out. I just want to be out. And, you lovingly reflected to me too, that I just needed to try it. That is really what I needed. I needed to I do some sessions with my clients. I needed to go attend events, and it was great until it was not great. And it was like, okay, now is the time I now have a little bit more space from all this to rest and to allow more grief to come up, as I will continue doing for the rest of my life. And so it's that beautiful balance of like not non-judgment of wherever you are is perfect. And sometimes we do need that loving mirror of like, your body needs to rest a little bit. And it's, I reflected on it, and I was so triggered at first by what she said. And I was like, she doesn't know anything. And then I realized, yeah, she's right. She's right. And I had so much resistance to going back into the void, into the just letting everything go. I was like, I've done that so much. I'm so tired of just letting everything go. But the void and the liminal space is so fertile and so full of important. And that's another thing in our culture, right? Like the winter when nothing is sprouting, we're there's nothing that can be seen on the surface. The void, the darkness, it's really not honored as much as it should be. I think we're getting there more. We're getting back to like nature has 4 seasons and there's cycles, and there's times to rest and there's times to create and all of this. And I think we just really desperately need to be reminded that those are really sacred spaces too. And grief is a lot like that, of really giving yourself the space when you can, when you're ready, to just be in the darkness. As I mentioned, I think in the beginning, it's like there's so much wanting to rush through, wanting to get back, wanting to and people will honor you and they'll say, oh my gosh, you're so strong. So as you and I have talked about many times, it's brave to be like, I'm sad.
I'm still sad.
I'm
And
still
it's
sad.
not going away.
Correct. It's not going away. And yes, my mom got to meet my son, and it is still extremely sad constantly that she doesn't get to see anything else in the physical. And I mean, even now, this is coming through too. Like, I think I am in talking about spirituality and connection, right? I'm like, before she died, I was like, this is going to be fine. Like, I'll just connect with her spiritually and it'll be great. And like, I'm so glad I'm a spiritual person. And yes. And I was so shocked by, I couldn't feel her at all after she died. I was just so fucking angry at her for leaving me, for some of the choices that she made. And I could not feel her at all. And I was like terrified because I was like, I was banking on that, like, like that I'm going to really feel her. And again, in that case, I gave myself space. You know, a lot of people, like other people in my life, because I am around a lot of spiritual people who are connected to her, were like, are you connected? Like, oh my God, I'm, you know, really just kind of this trying to connect, which I think is, again, totally fine. If that's what you are doing, beautiful. I just knew there was like this knowing of, I need to wait. I don't want to try to force some kind of connection with her. And I did feel there were a couple moments in those early weeks when I did still feel that, but I was so angry. I was like, I don't even want to be connected to her right now. I'm angry. And I needed to feel that. And I needed, again, in this container with my mentor, just to scream and pound my fists. My throat was raw. My fists were sore from pounding pillows. I mean, I had so much anger, and I needed to move through that. You know, I needed to let that in, and that was really scary too. And I needed to just be with everything that was there. And slowly over time, I have felt more and more connected with her. And I'm still allowed to miss her in the physical. I'm still allowed, you know, there's anger that's still there. Of course, there's longing, there's sadness, it all can exist at once. It just because I feel connected with her spiritually, it also exists right alongside the, like, why isn't she here in the physical? Yeah.
There's a lot of pulling apart we can do of all of this, but the one thing, that's not true. I'm never going to say just one thing. As everybody listening knows, you included. Let me start here instead. We had so many great conversations around not comparing what
Yeah.
it's like you having really respected the way and admired the way that I had moved with my grief, and
Yeah.
both of us, but me needing to kind of say, and you're going to do it super differently than I did. It's going to be different, and not comparing circumstances, and also finding the beautiful overlap of circumstances and how similarities are there. We've had so many incredible conversations around what I call like finding your attuned pace, and you doing all of that so beautifully. An attuned pace for me is allowing yourself to connect with what you need, where it is now, follow that until it changes, and trusting that that is your way of honoring your grief journey. And you did that so beautifully of like, no, I need to be out. I need to go do these things. I need to see people. I want people to meet my baby. And
Mm-hmm.
great, trust that. And
Mm-hmm.
it will take you right to the next thing maybe that's 5 years of doing the exact same thing.
Right.
And
Totally.
maybe it is in 2 weeks, I'm going to realize I'm in a different space already, because in its nonlinearness, these are arcs, constant arcs. They might be baby arcs. They might be lifelong arcs. They might, every moment that grief invites us into something, there is a whole storyline that comes along with it, a whole experience of, like many lifetimes that get to be lived within it. And so first of all, I love how grief invites us into deeper relationship with ourselves, but also how it requires deeper relationship with ourselves in order to continue to meet it over and over. And when we talked, I loved how you started using layers. I had used levels. Levels is really not the right word for what I was talking about earlier, but this sense of layers, of letting the grief work and the grief experience penetrate us on greater layers than just the mind. Because the mind also, in our world, ends up being a protector from feeling our grief because it's been deemed unsafe for so long. It's been deemed vulnerable, weak, whatever. There's thousands of other things that go along with that. And so part of the reason that I believe that you were able to step into, in different places at different times, the exploration that you're on and in with grief now, is that you already, through your process, had already been on a journey of developing a deep relationship to yourself. And so as we talk about, you heard, your body spoke and you listened. Some people might not yet have that relationship with themselves, which is fine. And in the grief process, you will probably be invited into little nuggets of beginning to listen to and connect to and decide, oh, do I want to honor this or not? Am I ready to honor this or not? Do I need help in honoring this or not? Do I have capacity to honor this or not? And this brings me to kind of this sense of ceremonial space and to slowing down and to beginning to cultivate relationship with our pain, or continue to nourish that relationship with our pain over time if we already have cultivated, is really, in order to listen to those parts of us, in order to offer space to us, we really do need to let our nervous systems land. We do need to feel safe and held. We do need to have spaciousness, because it isn't something, yes, some people get into, you and I both have our own versions of quick intuitive hits or body hits or something, but the very deep messages and knowings that have guided both of us have come from having just enough space to be able to hear that or feel that. It doesn't mean that it was, 6 days of silence or anything like that, but
I wish that.
it was just like 1 hour of somebody holding space for you to step into a little bit slower of a cadence, and because grief carries, and it's like a symphony of cadences, really. It's not just like one specific. People, when I first lost my mom, talked a lot about, or I would read a lot about, this idea of the cadence of grief. And in that early grief, I really felt like, there is this kind of downward feeling cadence that I am being asked to meet. And over time, I have realized that that's just like the opening cello note to the symphony of your life. It ultimately takes on so many different rhythms. And this is part of the reason that you have a deep relationship with music, that I love music connected to grief work too, because the many notes and the many rhythms and the many beats of music bring that cadence alive in our bodies in a way that we can't always, through the mental world, connect with. And so a little bit of holding, just I was going to say a lot of holding is fantastic too, but just a little bit every week is enough to kind of let your system ease into listening to what's there and feeling what's next and receiving what is here in the moment that's needing to be tended to, that's asking to be tended to, that's asking to be trusted, so that whatever the next exploration of this, of this journey is, can have space to come up and to move through you, whether that be another expression of grief, whether it be a new idea, whether it be a conversation that needs to be had with, a loved one in order to feel like you are living your life in the way that you need to be living your life right now. There's a million different expressions of that. And I love one of my favorite I don't have a favorite conversation. I love all of our conversations, but I specifically remember this moment where you had, maybe it was like in July. It was right as you were getting in touch with your anger on a new level. And you texted me about a session you'd had with Jasmine and somebody else, and that you had sat for tea in like a 24-hour period. And I was like, whoa, and then you said, I felt the new iteration of my business starting to come through for the first time. And I was like, yes, because there was enough space to like release, and you had this powerful release of anger. It was like so much release that got to happen while you were so held, that then you just like got to receive what was, and the droplets of the golden liquid of what would be next, right? And it didn't all come like, okay, here, now go do it, Melina. It was just like this, almost like fairy dust sinking into your cells of like, okay, there's something
a little glimpse.
And I know you've experienced that in body work related stuff too. And I have too in this process, but as we offer sacred ground and welcome people to join us in this, I think it's so powerful to talk about how ceremony and sacred space, and what do we mean by sacred space? For me, you can answer this differently if you want to. For me, there is this sense of bringing like heartfelt intention, and a heartfelt intention that is that truly sees everything as equal, that sees everything as welcome, and that says, I am here and I am willing to be with what's here. And I see that there is life in this, even though it feels like death. Or even though it is life right now, that there are parts of me that are needing to die to meet it. And in the like complexity and completeness of that, that's what I feel is connected to the word sacred. And so as we carve out these sacred spaces, they nourish and offer us so much in how we can begin to layer by layer make space for a different relationship with our pain, where our body actually feels like it's safe in this moment because I am not alone. I am not judged. I am not going to be overcome. I'm not floating in the ocean by myself. Somebody is on a surfboard holding on to my hand. I am not going to drown here. Okay, I can let even a fraction of my grief or my sadness or my pain be present and like feel it today. I don't need to go beyond what I'm ready for, but I can say yes. I can say okay to just whatever it is that's there. And the beautiful thing about this is your system and your body and your energetic and emotional system, in my experience with these things, it's not like a tidal wave comes over you if you're ready for just a baby still ocean wave. It's just like you are met with what you're ready for and what is the perfect layer to be with, to continue. Like this is, I've really been wanting to write or talk about how I really despise the terms like we need to move forward, or how are you moving forward, or you need to move forward. Like that was something that came up for me a lot in my early grief, and something that I knew that just by living, just by being here, I was moving forward. But this idea of moving forward being so linear, whereas I feel like moving forward is actually round. It's actually this like
Spiral.
rolling, it's a spiral. It's like this rolling sensation that like folds into itself over and over and over
Yeah.
again. And so I don't know how I got on the topic of moving forward, but basically by just allowing like whatever's there to meet you, that is all that's needed to continue the very, whether it be fast or slow that day, the natural momentum of your being in moving forward, and in moving forward and like not leaving grief behind, but what is this walk with it that I'm going to continue to have, continue to deepen into, continue to live and share. I mean, as you were talking about connection with your mom, I don't know that I've told you this, but just in the past week, twice, one was in a dream and it was actually at your house. I dreamt that my mom and your mom were at your blessing, or we were at another version of your blessing way. When Melina had her blessing way, we weren't sure if her mom was going to be alive at the time. And I traveled to California and we made a bunch of food and we had like the most incredible day.
You got to
And
meet my mom, which was so
I got to
special.
meet your mom, cuddle on the couch with your mom. You and I got to like embrace in tremendous sobs afterwards. It was something I'm sure neither of us will ever forget.
Yeah.
And I had this kind of dream. I've had a lot of dreams recently, and I had this dream of my mom when she was well, like being in your kitchen with your mom, being in your kitchen with your mom. And I was talking to my mom about helping me make some food. And then a couple of days later, my sister just texted me, I miss mom. And I said, yeah, me too. And I just happened to be sitting in the same chair that I'm sitting in now. And for the first time, I was able to imagine her knowing my house, like as if she were well, walking around my house as if she knew it like the back of her hand, like she'd been here 5 million times, and hollering up the stairs to me while I was in my office, and imagining sitting on the couch with her, which she probably sat on the couch with me 5 million times. So that's probably why. But, this is almost 4 years of never having imagined her so far in this space. And one of the griefs being when we bought this house, she'll never, walking out of our old apartment a couple months after she died, she'll never know another home that I'll live in. And imagining her in her wellness arriving to my home like that was so beautiful, because also when you've seen someone deteriorate physically over time, it takes a long time to unravel those images and to receive the restored images of them in their vibrancy again, and their radiance. And so, as we move forward, as you so beautifully spoke about, like there's this continued deepened relationship with grief that we welcome in when we welcome in that spiral moving forward, not when we think of moving forward as like, well, that happened and now I need to go this way.
And something, that's so beautiful about just witnessing you on your grief journey, that I admire is all those griefs you mentioned, right? I mean, that one that you just mentioned. Yeah, like the griefs that I'd never heard anyone. I mean, there's the grief of like losing, this person is no longer here physically, and that's the one that gets a lot of attention. And then there's so many others, the changing family dynamics, exactly what you mentioned, like my mom is not going to be here to see when I move, and that grief, and all the little griefs, like they're just constantly knocking at the door.
Yes.
And we have a choice. We can push them away and say, no, not right now, which is valid. Sometimes that's what we need to do. We have, I mean, I'm a mom, I can't let it all in all the time. I remember in the days after my mom died, like after I put my son to bed, I would just cry. I would just be like, okay, now's my time to cry. Like he's in bed. Because I didn't have time, I just couldn't during the day. So sometimes we do need to push it, but it, like you said so beautifully, just taking even an hour, it doesn't have to be 6 days of silence. And for most of us, that's not attainable, but to
No,
just have an
or
hour.
desirable.
Yeah. And that's why I love ceremony too, because ceremony, I think you had asked what sacred space means.
Yeah.
And I loved what you said about being heartfelt, intentional. And to me, it's really honoring our grief. What keeps coming up is like honoring our grief as sacred. It's not something we need to move on from. It's not something we need to escape. It's not something we need to minimize or heal from, or it's like, no, we need to honor this. This is part of being a human being. This is sacred ground. Like this is connecting us with life and with our hearts and with our purpose and with our, with our joy and our creativity and all of it. And to me, ceremony and dropping into these deep spaces is such a beautiful part of that. I mean, you mentioned I've received beautiful visions. I've received so much from these kinds of spaces, and I need these spaces. And if you're someone who's, I think with grief, you and I talk about, it's like scary. It can be really scary to sign up for something that's like, this is about grief. I don't know if I have grief. I don't know if I haven't lost a loved one, or I don't know if I'm ready for this. It's like, I love what you spoke about too, of there's no expectations. And that's what's so beautiful about ceremonies. It's just a container. Like you don't need to cry. You don't need to say anything. If you just want to show up and just be there, that's it. And not say a word, like you're met and held. And I totally understand that it can feel scary. And that's also why I think these loving containers are so needed, because sometimes you just need someone to hold you. And when you are starting out, when you are like, where do I even begin with this? And like you and I fully trust that we trust in everyone who joins us that you're exactly where you need to be, and you're going to experience exactly what you need to experience, whether that's complete stillness, whether that's just a sense of ease and being held, whether that's tears, whether that's an idea, it could be so many of these things. And there's absolutely zero pressure to be feeling anything or doing anything. And there's zero judgment. And I think there's zero expectations. And I think that those spaces are so needed, to just be still, to listen, as you said, to feel the body, to feel what's here. And on the other side of the fear of, oh my gosh, what if there's this thing that's going to come and overtake me, which I've totally felt. There's just so much peace, and there's so much just more available when you're willing to be held, when you're willing to take a chance on something that you might be scared to, especially when you know that there's no expectation of anything you need to be feeling. And that's ironically, in tea ceremony, which is part of our event, has been such a beautiful ally for me in my grief journey. And what I hear from people over and over again is, because people come to ceremony and some cry the entire time, some sit in silence, some are like, yeah, I was thinking about my lunch, like I was thinking about going to the farmer's market. Like there's no expectation. You can, or sometimes people will say my mind was so active, I couldn't really drop in. Or some people will say, oh, I dropped in the very last bowl, or, I don't know, like there's zero expectations. And I think we're craving spaces like that, where you can just come exactly as you are, but you're held in a really strong container. You and I are strong containers. And I know that I mean, I don't even need to say that. I don't need to say it, because it can be felt by everybody listening to this. And we don't need to say one word.
The spaces we hold are very multidimensional and just welcoming to the full being and experience.
Did you, what were you remembered what you were going to say?
Yeah, but then I thought of so bring me back to, I want to talk about tea
Okay.
and my first
Yeah.
experience with tea with you, because I think
Yeah.
that might help kind of this exploration of tea. And I would love for you to talk about that more. So what I was going to say earlier that I had forgotten was, we've also talked a lot, and I talk to clients about this a lot, of the grief that nobody talks about any step in life you're taking and that person just not being there for it. And we talked
Yeah.
about this with the houses, but it's really heartbreaking. It's really devastating to be, it's its own its own one of those instruments in the grief symphony, is this
Yeah.
devastation that even though something can be so incredibly beautiful and joyous and good, that whomever is there, whomever you've lost is not going to be there with you in it. And I have worked with this with people that have gone through tremendous breakups, where just stepping into, actually they feel more authentically connected and more alive and more excited about their life than they've ever felt before. But they miss even somebody that's still alive, they miss that person
Yeah.
so much, or it's so sad to imagine having a whole nother life without them. And I know you and I have talked about, just like, it's so crazy and hard to imagine an entire lifetime of our moms not being here, and
Yeah.
an entire lifetime of, like, yes, you are still in the first year. In the first year, there's so many firsts. Like, everything is a first. And on top of that, you have a baby and he's living all of his firsts, and you're
Yeah.
living all of your firsts as a mother. And
Yeah.
then it doesn't stop at the first year. And a lot of times the first year is given this kind of time period of, like, oh yeah, all of the firsts. And
Yeah.
it's this, um, just, just like moving into my house, or like stepping into something beautiful, or you know or starting your business from a new place, like kind of creating the next iteration from your business from a new place, or for me when I have my children, or um,
Yeah.
all of these things that are so incredibly beautiful that they won't be here to be living with us. It's incredibly heartbreaking every time. It doesn't get better or easier. And in order to walk with that, I think also another thing that ceremony offers us, and tea offers us so beautifully, is presence, and this attunement to presence. And presence is really kind of at, again, going back to the symphony, it's like the through line of all grief stuff. The more we can attune ourselves to presence and learn presence and invite ourselves into presence and welcome in presence. And, I could say a million things about, use a million different words for that. The more we experience that presence with our grief, the more we can say, welcome into our life, to the life that's coming, and know that we are going to meet everything with presence as it comes, and in that have space to meet the layers as they arise. And part of these sacred spaces is the invitation to become, like, present, not only present with your eyes and your mind, and like this hyper focus. I'm squinting and putting like narrow vision focus with my hands. It's like this heart presence and this body presence and this, like, seated in your root and your womb presence, and feeling your hips and letting everything be alive here now, and just experiencing that. And so moving to tea, the first time that you shared tea with me and served me tea, it was at my house. You came to visit, and we had never been together in person, and we were both really looking forward to it. We had such a great time. And I had heard you talk about tea, but I hadn't really experienced it. I didn't really know what to expect. And it was really beautiful. And I want to reflect on this for the people that have never done, quote unquote, done tea before.
Done tea.
Yeah, or
Done tea is a verb.
Experience tea ceremony.
That's what I say. No, I say
Yeah,
done tea,
I
which
know.
is so funny.
I know you and I said we did tea or whatever, but ultimately and we have had many conversations about this too, because you've really shared this great exploration that you've been on for many years with me in the past year or so. But this kind of invitation to come present, to bring our focus here to this moment, to the tea representing and bringing us into this moment, and then allowing ourselves to receive the medicine of the tea, allowing ourselves to be in the practice of receiving as we also, sip our, offer it to ourselves through our hands, and to just be in the experience of letting something move into us and maybe through us. Sometimes when I drink tea, it's almost like I can imagine the heat moving into me and like going into all of my, channels and everything. And then I sweat a little bit, or there's something moving out. So it's like a total through me experience. And in a way, that's a metaphor. You always say tea is a metaphor for everything. It's like teas, but it's also a metaphor for learning how to allow grief to move through like that, and for it to hit and heat and touch all of these places in us and then come out in another form. So when you served me most days while you're here visiting, like the first day, I remember, my mind was wondering, okay, what's this going to be like? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I?
Really normal.
What are all these things? And then also receiving these messages, and then over a couple of days of doing this with you, receiving more and more messages, just feeling a really also deep connection to gratitude that I think can be hard to find in grief, really hard grief moments without that kind of sacred pause. And every time I've sat with you, when you serve me, I think it has been a little bit more emotional in person. Like there's definitely been tears. I've definitely received intuitive visions and messages, really beautiful ones that have stuck with me. And when I sit by myself now that I've learned and, have, thanks to you, my own little set of things, some days I'm really tearful and there's a lot of emotion there. And the last few times, as examples, there's just this sense of peace. But I walk away with this incredibly beautiful connection to my wholeness, to the energies are alive in me and around me. And it's like the tea gently brought all of me and all of life online. And now for the rest of the day, I get to move from that place. And so I'd love for you, if you want to add whatever you want to add about tea ceremony, but I just wanted to share somebody that is new to tea and hasn't done a lot of the philosophical explorations of it or learned the technicalities of it like you have. I wanted to share a little bit about what that experience has been like for me. It's something that I feel like I can incorporate and sit with in and welcome into every part of my life. And so if maybe on the day we're doing Sacred Ground, you're not feeling ultra connected to your grief at the beginning, or maybe even through the entire thing, the tea will offer you whatever you need, whatever is there. And the awesome thing about this not being a linear journey and those no expectations, as you were talking about, is like, it's all great. It's all welcome, whatever that is.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I'm so happy every time you text me your tea that you did tea. You're like, I sat with this tea. And I'm like, yes. It's so great. I love bringing people into tea. And also, yeah, it's so beautiful. I always kind of see tea. I love you have that vision of it like moving through your body. I really see it like moving through people
Yeah.
and like the fluidity of like, it touching the people it's meant to. And, that there's no expectation around any of it. But that I always just love it. Kind of, it's slow, organic unfurling and to those who are called to it. And yeah, tea is, I mean, I could say so much about it, but really it is a beautiful space holder in and of itself. It's a beautiful medicine. It's a gentle medicine. Um, the teas that I drink, both ceremonially and, casually, but ceremonially are called living teas. So I recommend for anyone who's going to join us, not required, but these teas, the specific types of teas hold a really powerful energy, the plants themselves. And so we think of tea in the West as chamomile and there's herbal tea and there's all these other teas, but the tea that I'm talking about is from the plant Camellia sinensis. They're tea trees. The teas that I drink ceremonially all come from China, certain regions of China, which is the birthplace of tea, where they have these tea trees, and the living teas have to meet many different criteria to be called living teas. So they're beyond organic. The trees are wild. The farmers have relationships with the trees. These trees are hundreds of years old. They're tended to really lovingly, and part of tea ceremony is the energy of all of it is important. The way the trees are treated, the way the farmers, the energy of the farmer, the energy of the person shipping the tea. I mean, all of it is part of the experience. And the tea ware, and there's like endless stuff, but really to just get started, the one thing I would recommend, if at all possible, is to purchase a living tea. And so two of the places to do that are Living Tea and Global Tea Hut, which I'm sure you'll link to, because the energies of those teas have been so carefully and lovingly harvested and tended. And that will really add. That's a big part. There's many parts of tea ceremony specifically, but that's the most important part is the tea, right? That's the most important part where we all start. And so if you're completely new, recommend doing that if possible. If you're sensitive to caffeine, I've put in our description a couple of teas that have been aged for many, many decades. So the caffeine levels are very low. I know you're sensitive to caffeine, so we've been testing some out. And so there's some and these are not, the caffeine is still not going to be the same as a plantation tea or a regular tea bag, right? That these are like, again, really the caffeine levels it tends to be just very clean and not, crazy levels of energy if that's something you're sensitive to. But yeah, these specific teas all have such a different energy to them. And if not, if you're not able to purchase, also totally fine. You're more than welcome to join us, because the next aspect of this is just presence. As you mentioned, is just like, I hear from so many people, and it is so hard to describe until you've experienced it, like grief, right?
Yeah.
It's like, but what I hear from people constantly is, wow, I did not know how much I needed to just sit here and sip this tea. Like, whether it's just hot water and lemon or hot water and mint, like anything. To have that experience of just being dropped in, to feel the warm water running through your body and just be present. And for me, in tea ceremony is so sensory and sensual, right? It's like the feeling of the bowl in my hands, the warm bowl, the steam rising, the sound of the water hitting the bowl, the leaves. And if you're just starting, if you don't have any experience with tea ceremony, we're going to be doing leaves in a bowl, which is the simplest. All you need is a kettle of hot water and a bowl and some leaves. So we've put in the recommendation, some teas that are a little bit larger leaves, so that you can just place a few in the bowl and then you just put some hot water in the bowl. And what's so beautiful about leaves in the bowl, it's the simplest method, is just watching the leaves like expand, and it's such a beautiful connection with the tea and the leaves themselves. So that's what we're going to be doing in our ceremony. It's just super simple, and yeah, you don't need to know any of the technical aspects of it. It's really just about bringing presence to your cup, your bowl, and seeing what's there. And there's so much more that can be explored from there, but that's the basis of it.
Yeah, I was sitting with an oolong this morning that I've grown to really like. I've tried it a couple times now, called Mercy, and I was observing the leaves in my bowl and how like tight and dry they looked, and then
They're rolled, yeah.
with every cup, just I felt like this blossoming happening, and it was really cool. I know that you and I could sit here for 5,000 hours and continue on. And yeah, maybe just do a moment to check in with if there's anything else you want to say to conclude.
No, I feel really complete. Do you want to share a little bit about Sacred Ground or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So on November 17th, Melina and I are having our first Sacred Ground event, which is a ceremony for grief and growth. And the first 30 minutes of this time together will be a tea ceremony. It's all virtual, so you can show up. It's a Sunday. You can show up from your home in a cozy place and experience this, the tea leaves, the presence. We'll have some time for meditation once we complete the tea, and some musical explorations with our bodies, whether it be like somatic and intuitive guided movement, or whether you're already ready to write and express, or some kind of expression wants to come out. And I'll guide that after the meditation. And then we'll have time to circle and come together, and for gentle guidance and for connection and witnessing around anything that's moving for you that you want to share, or anything you have questions about or want support around. And we both know how rich and important the communal space, like our friendship, is a tiny microcosm of the experience of how powerful and necessary it is to be able to share our grief over and over and over again in sacred spaces. And I'm so like, we have cultivated this together, and I'm so excited to welcome people into the next evolution of it on a more public level of being able to experience and receive the witnessing. I've just wrote a reflection, actually was in the program that you and I met in, my first time being fully witnessed in community in my grief after years of crying and having grief expressions that people either pitied me around, or one of the leaders of another group, like, because people weren't really grief literate or hadn't had these experiences themselves, or had them but weren't in connection with their grief, the response was, I think Ellie just likes to cry. And he was like, no, I mean, like, I don't have anything against.
We like to cry.
I don't have anything against crying. Does it feel fun to sit here in front of 20 strangers at a retreat and like bawl my eyes out? Not really. But I can't not do it because I can't. I'm unwilling to look away. And
I admire that so much about you.
So I have learned over the years, and you in your own way, like, basically anything that could come from you in this experience will not scare us, could not scare us. And I am excited to just offer a space where you get to experience and receive whatever is there for you. So welcome, and please join us in Sacred Ground.
We can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, thank you so much for listening to this. Yeah, I love you so much, Ellie. And it's an honor, absolute honor to walk alongside you in life, in grief, in love, in friendship, in community. And Ellie and I we've had planned an event together. We've been wanting to do an event together for years. And we had planned one and had a date and everything for last December. And then my mom went into the hospital and was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So we, of course, lovingly set it aside, and then it was not the time. I was deep into the void, really, until now, until about this month, when I have been feeling the call to come out, and I am so honored to, Ellie and I were like, all right, I think it's time. And so I'm just so honored to be offering this with you, and so excited that it's time to offer it. And I can't wait to see where it goes. And yeah, if you're feeling called to join us, we would love to have you. It's $33. So really accessible. And if that's not even accessible, like, please just let us know. You can email hello@ellieflow.com or hello@melinacharis.com and let us know, because we want it to be accessible, and we'd love to have you, and we can't wait to meet you and honor you, and yeah, just hold really beautiful space for you. Love you.
I love you too. It's going to be so beautiful. We both know, I'm smiling so big because I'm like, we both know we have so many future offerings coming, and like it will be, this is so special because the first one.
Yes,
and
it is. A year in the literal year.
Yeah. And I think around the date when we were going to have it, your mom was literally like almost, almost died those few days in the hospital. It was ended up being a very intense moment. And yeah, I'm in awe of these journeys. Yeah. I love you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Transformed by Grief. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and to share it with a loved one that needs this medicine today. If you are ready to deepen into your own Transformed by Grief process, you can join the Sanctuary membership or work with me one-on-one at ellieflow.com. See you soon.